Scary.
Today's episode of Watching the Throne is brought to you by Audible.
And Audible is offering Watching the Throne listeners a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. The website is www.audibletrial.com/WTT.
Yeah, and of course there are, thousands upon thousands of books to choose from on there. I would personally recommend the David Lynch biography called The Man from Another Place, if you're into that. And there's plenty, actually, I was just looking through there. If you just search Kanye West, there's plenty of stuff to search through and learn about Kanye.
I actually have never thought about looking for Kanye stuff on Audible. I always I use Audible now for all of my nonfiction reading, as I'll still read fiction in the book form, but I've been using it for a lot of like business reading, for a lot of like neuroscience and like personal developments. So recently I've been listening to Traction, which is a book for startups and looking at the different realms of traction for startups.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, so if you're in any of that, again, it's www.audibletrial.com/WTT. And if you do that, it's basically like giving us a free donation. It'll get you a free book on Audible, and it kind of just helps everyone out.
Yeah, it's would really appreciate you taking the time to look it out, to look it up, because it really does help us. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Scary.
Everybody want to know what I would do if I didn't win. I guess we'll never know.
So keep your love. I don't get enough of it. Jesus just rose again.
Listen to the kids.
Welcome to Watching the Throne, a lyrical analysis of Kanye West. My name is Chris Lambert, and today we have a special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jeffrey McCune. I'm a professor at Washington University in St. Louis in African American Studies and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies.
Nice. And the reason that Jeffrey is on the show today is because he has a very special class that he's teaching this semester. It's a Kanye West class, which I wish I was back in school to take. How did the class come about? Like, what's the official name?
Well, the official name of the class is The Politics of Kanye West, Black Genius and Sonic Aesthetics. And I would say that the course came about because I'm always interested in pop culture, but particularly pop cultural iconography. So like how it is that folks are made into like big deals, right? So I'm always interested in folks like Beyonce and Nicki Minaj, Aretha, Patty, David Bowie, Prince, right? All these folks, right, could have courses about them because they've made cultural impacts. And particularly I was interested in this course on Kanye for a long, long time, but I was in a conversation with a colleague, and I was telling him that I've always wanted to teach Kanye because I think that Kanye is one of the few artists who actually articulates a philosophy around his performances, right? He's a person who actually theorizes through performance. Yes. And some of that comes from probably having a mother who was an English professor who probably dealt a lot with kind of post-structural theory and all these other things. And so Kanye feels like he has to have some type of theoretical underpinning for his work. And so I'm really interested in him because that is very unique to Kanye West. And so I wanted to teach this course partially for that reason. And of course, we'll get into it, but I have a whole bunch of personal reasons why I think, it's no coincidence that I'm teaching this.
Yes. I mean, what you're saying there with having the reasoning behind his work is the entire reason we have this podcast, is because we felt that there was more purpose to his albums, not just to mention each individual track, but the album as a whole, especially from Graduation up through The Life of Pablo, to where it's like, this isn't just music. Like, this guy has something that he is trying to say in the way that, like, an artist in a movie or in a novel has something that they're trying to say on the whole. Yeah.
Yeah, and that whole message, right, is just trying to get at this idea of being a message maker and a meaning maker, right? And it's so interesting to see someone who has an intentionality around their art. And I'm usually not interested in artists' intentions, right? But what I'm interested in is if their intentions align with the reception.
Interesting. Right? Okay.
And I actually think that his is pretty accurate, right? Like I think there's an alignment between what he wants to output and what he wants us to take in.
What do you think has been his most successful project in that terms of like intent and alignment with reception? That's a big question.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about
like do you view it as music or something outside of music?
So yeah, this is interesting. So I think that Kanye has a particular mantra which we can trace through every piece of his work. His whole catalog includes this idea of excellence, right? Of being greater than one actually may being greater than one is perceived to be, and being greater than how one has been scripted, right? And so it's always interesting to me that Kanye is one of those people who articulates this kind of mantra, but he's also one of those people who is trapped by the impossibility of his own genius, or what I say specifically is the impossibility of Black genius, right? In this case, I really feel like Kanye comes out of a time and a social location, Chicago, where in the 80s, it was very difficult to locate kind of Black excellence, right? It was such a time where economics was creating drug zones, gang zones, and we were told that we were going to die by the time we were 25, right? And, and We Don't Care, in his first, album, he tells us, right, that's all a joke. Because we were supposed to die at 25, but it's a joke because we alive, right? And if you're listening to this album, right, you're thinking about that. And so for me, I get excited about that because that is actually what compels me, regardless of the, what I call the manic moments of Kanye, right? It compels me to actually understand those moments as kind of hyperbolic moments that were made by the media, and to understand that the music itself was made by Kanye and his producers and his production staff. And if we focus in there, we get much more understanding of the kind of generosity of Kanye West versus seeing this kind of scripted and what some call the monstrosity Kanye West, right? And so I'm not interested in that as much. I do think that there's a place for it because I do think that some of that monstrosity is a product of iconography and public visibility. And as you said, I heard you say, right, the camera following him around wherever he goes.
Absolutely. Well, so when you first had the idea for the class, or has this been something where when you knew you were getting into being a professor teaching, you had this class in the back of your mind for a while, and now you're finally like, now's my time to shine?
So this is it, right? So I also have found that students take so many of my courses and they bring up Kanye West. Kanye West, and WashU particularly, there's a lot of students who are interested in this course, and we'll get to my first day because folks was crying at the end of the course, but at the end of the day because they couldn't get in. But that was a whole nother thing. But I always knew that I wanted to teach this course in graduate school because I was getting my PhD when Kanye first dropped his first single, right? And I was thinking to myself, like, damn, this is an artist we're going to have to watch. And after the next album, I was like, oh, my God, at some point I have to teach a Kanye West course. But I will tell you that in the university, these type of courses are commonly poo-pooed upon.
Right.
Oftentimes, people don't take particularly Black iconography very seriously. They don't take Black icons very seriously. And they don't take, generally, they don't take pop culture as serious. There's a kind of high art, low art dichotomy that exists within the academy, unfortunately. And so I am always aware of that, and I'm always fighting against that. And I always push against that. In my courses, I always institute some area of pop culture. But anyway, so for me, this question of when to teach it came post-tenure. So after I got tenure at the university, and I was quite well known as a theorist, as an ethnographer, as a kind of philosopher in his own right, as a person who is known in the field of Black sexuality studies and Black popular culture, and anthropology and ethnography, I decided, okay, I can do this. And so I taught this course because students really wanted it, and then I also taught this course because actually, quite frankly, faculty kept encouraging me to teach it because they wanted to hear about it.
Which is fantastic that you're finally in a position then to get having like knowing that you're not going to get the backlash from the university because you've already been validated in your career and by the university, and the kids are excited to take the class. So it's this great position for you having that moment in time and knowing that these kids this is a topic that they want to hear about and want to engage with.
Definitely.
And did you have any pushback then when you first proposed the class of people being like, did you have to push hard to try to get it through, or was the university at this point pretty much like, yeah, this seems like something like we're more open to this at this point?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I think that my university, Washington University, is quite open to unique courses, courses that are going to really show the ways in which we are at the cutting edge of the work that we're doing. And Kanye West, as a theorist, philosopher, performer, as I shape him, actually became quite an excitement for the curriculum committee. So when I proposed the course to the curriculum committee, the first email that I got back was, all of us want to take this course. The little pushback that came was just because at the time, Kanye was receiving a lot of trolling and hate mail and a lot of animus, right, around not only his meetings with Trump or his meetings with the president-elect, as I like to say, or his meetings with other folk, or just the issues around, still around Taylor Swift and that controversy.
Yeah.
They were reluctant to allow me to do public stuff. And so the students couldn't have a public blog, which is one of the things I wanted to do uniquely, was to get folks out in the world talking about it and being able to take class with us in a sense. So I can't do that piece. What I am doing instead, though, is I am doing some Kanye West lectures that will substitute for that. There will be public lectures for the public.
Nice.
That will have a live feed, that will be broadcasted, those type of things. So I'm really excited about that component of the course, and am really thinking about how to make sure that that the broader public gets to have access to those lectures.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, because that's just cutting edge higher education at that point. That's which
Right.
Kanye West would be all about.
Right. And here's the thing, right? Another piece that I love about this is that Kanye is actually quite the academic, right? Mm. He's trained in the school of Donda, right? His mother, and there's so much to be understood about that, right? That education is not always one that happens in the setting of the university, but then we actually learn through folks like Kanye West, right? We learn through all these other folks who have access to education in some informal ways. And so I'm very interested in that piece like I asked my students yesterday, so I guess I'll move it to
please.
The first day of the class, which was amazing. And here I am with 100 and something students in a lecture hall who, of course, there was originally only supposed to take 40 students, right? And I'm sitting here with these students, looking at them from all backgrounds, and I'm seeing in them an excitement around learning more about not just Kanye, but with the way in which Kanye indexes different moments in cultural history over the last 15, 20 years, right? The way in which he maps out cultural trends, cultural politics, actual politics, the way in which he challenges the ways in which we view Black men, Black masculinity, Black genius, the way in which we think about art, the way in which we think about entrepreneurship, the way we think about business, the way we think about sex, the way we think about sexuality, right? All of this stuff. And as I'm telling them this, I can just see them getting all excited and revved up about the course. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to teach, right? And it was such a beautiful moment to have, after the course, have these students who were standing there literally saying to me, I will write a paper. I will write a paper to tell you why I need to be in this class. I've been following Kanye West since I was a little boy. Because, these are folks who, were beyond the 80s. They were largely born in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
May have one or two really erudite students who were born in the 2000s, right? Who might be 16, 17 years old, right? Who just happened to be in college early, right? So these are really fascinating. I was gonna say something else, but fascinating and fabulous students. And so I was really excited to see all these students there. And the first day of class, what I really was trying to get them to see was that Kanye is a producer of knowledge, but Kanye himself, as an artist, as an icon, is also a body of knowledge, right? That not just in terms of like the breadth of who he is, but he himself has been made an instrument and is an instrument for understanding the cultural climate and the cultural moment in which we live.
There's such a lightning rod around what anybody does. Like, any action you take in the world has a reaction. But when you're a celebrity and an icon like Kanye is, every action you take, does it meet with a positive response, or does it meet with this backlash? So it is really interesting to see the bold choices he makes. Like, I think a common example would be something like 808s, where when 808s comes out, it's like, that's ahead of its time sonically. That's not what people expected from Kanye, wanted from Kanye. They wanted more late registration. They wanted more college dropout. And then you get 808s, and you're just like, what is this? And you really see how society's responding and where society goes from there.
And there was a clear decision made, right, at that point, that every album would be different, that it would map not only his evolution, but the kind of evolution of the culture. For example, 808 and the Heartbreaks came out around the same time that T-Pain was doing his thing, right? And so in many ways, right, he was indexing the kind of, there's a scholar, Kurt Graves, who wrote this really wonderful book called My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Obviously, ode to Kanye. But in that book, he identifies, right, Kanye as being a emblem of the digital era, right?
Yeah.
And that's not actually an exaggeration, right? And so we see this throughout his career, and I would actually argue that he's an emblem of digital voice, the way in which he actually digitizes voice and actually shows us how it is that one can use their voice or voices to actually make music, right? And it doesn't have to be harmonious, right? And so I actually think this is theoretical, right? In a lot of ways, it's theoretical and frames the life in which Kanye lives, right? I might do something, but it doesn't have to be harmonious. You don't have to like it. right? You don't have to clap every time I do something. I might make 808 and heartbreaks, but it doesn't have to necessarily break your heart or make your heart warm. It can be just a sucky album to you, but it will be excellence to me.
Yep.
Right? And that perspective is a theoretical framework that I think drives why 12 and 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds love this music. Think about being a teenager and being so-called rebellious, when really what you're doing is on a journey and a development to discover what it is that you really like, what you don't like. But everyone's calling you a rebel. And so it's really interesting to me to see those kind of connections being made, not only by myself, but by many other scholars, Mark Anthony Neal, as I said, Kirk Graves, Jason King, so many other folks who do this work, Guy Ramsey at University of Pennsylvania, right? There's so many people, Regina Bradley, Nicole Fleetwood. I can tell you that scholars are interested in this, and we do many things, but the music allows us to theorize through Black life in a very particular way. And Kanye is one of those artists that allows us to think about Black life, but also American life, and I would even say the global world, right? Especially as he starts talking about diamonds and things, right? We then have to talk about, not only his reverence for it, but the ways in which he also learns to critique for the ways in which we deploy those resources from other countries. So it's really interesting to see these kind of politically laden moments and then all these pleasure-filled moments that happen within the Kanye West catalog.
And they don't come off as like mistakes or as like tools just for like a great line or like something witty or smart. Like, he's not trying to make you laugh in those moments. He's trying to make you think. He's trying to get at something that's having commentary on the world, not just like talking about having champagne and like the most expensive this or that, how so many people associate with like radio rap.
Right. And even in radio rap, I mean, so this is the thing that I'm trying to do here, right? It's both and. It's never either or, right? And there is a logic to why it is that if I grew up in the South Side of Chicago in poverty, right, why I might actually elevate the access that I gained vis-a-vis a music that was supposed to be abandoned 30 years ago. Right. There's something about that is like, look at me now, right? I got more women, more more alcohol, more weed, more everything than I ever thought I would have. And it's kind of like teenage fantasy, right?
Yeah.
That is not to say that we can't lodge the critique for the grotesque materialism, sexism, homophobia, all those things that exist. But I do think that there's a logic, and it's not totally an illogic, right? As people dismiss it and they say it's illogical. One of the things I think about, Chris, is the ways that Kanye and I, this is a coincidence, but this is the coincidence I was saying earlier, in terms of why it is that I'm teaching this course. Kanye and I are the same age. We have the same fashion style. We honestly do. Like, I'm crazy. Like, sometimes people go, oh my God, you remind me of Conway. These are like these kind of older white rich women in Clayton, Missouri. Yeah. When I go places, they say Conway. I'm like, who is Conway? Right? It's just fascinating. But it's funny to me that they're making these associations. We grew up in the same neighborhood, right? What? So literally in Oak Lawn, Illinois, which is a middle class, black. Well, it wasn't black actually. It was a white community when we grew up. It is now a middle class black community, right? But it's interesting how white flight happened. He can write about all this stuff because we experienced it at the same time. And one of the things that I know is that when we were growing up, there was really a sense that we weren't supposed to make it in anything. Mm. When you looked at the school books being so raggedy sometimes, particularly for me, Kanye actually did go to high school within the kind of white enclave in which we lived. My parents were like, no, I want you to have experiences and exposures to blackness, and I want you to see how people are living beyond us. And they made me go to schools that actually had some books that were torn and tattered, and had classes that were broken off. Like I was in honors classes, and I would look over and I would say, "Oh, this is where all the white people are in honors, right?" And all the black folks would be in regular. And I would notice that divide, and that is what fuels me right now to push for better education, but also education that young people can relate to. And so, excuse me for getting serious for a moment, but
please.
But I think this is the type of seriousness that Kanye's work and Kanye as an artist and educator brings to the game.
Hell yeah. Like, that's amazing. Just to be able to have somebody that's doing that kind of work on a level to where you then, as an academic, you then as somebody that relates to Kanye's background, where he's coming from, can not only connect to the music that he's making, but then to apply it and use it in a way to like connect with students that may not otherwise want to or think about engaging in the kinds of conversations that you can have with them through Kanye's work.
So be it. and here's the thing. For my course, for the politics of Kanye West at WashU, you know, what I'm really not trying to do is this is not a fan course. So I admit, I love Kanye. I have loved Kanye since day one. I still love Kanye. Kanye met with the president-elect, which is not a problem for me. I think that celebrities meet celebrities all the time, right? It's just that the president-elect shouldn't be meeting with celebrities, in my opinion, at this moment, right?
Right.
So for me, I'm like, that's not a big deal for me. But here's the thing. You don't have to be a fan if we start thinking about Kanye the way that we think about Shakespeare. If we think about Kanye the way we think about August Wilson. If we think about Kanye the way that we think about Virginia Woolf, the way that we think about Chaucer, the way that we think about, the Beatles, the way that we think about Paul McCartney and other folks who we cherish in these ways that we don't have a problem teaching courses about them, right?
Yep.
And once we begin to think about Kanye in that way, we treat Kanye as a text, as a product born of the American society, right? We can do that and do it very well. Now, that's not to say that I don't think that we have to treat Kanye as a human, right? And that we have to humanize him. And humanizing him means to accept him as being complex and layered, not singular and manic,
Yeah.
right? Not just crazy, which I also have all types of critiques of, which is this idea that Kanye is crazy or has gone crazy. I said, what do you think that says to folks who actually have mental health issues, but are genius?
Right.
Right? I mean, and that's why he says, name one genius that ain't crazy. Right? I mean, that idea, right? Name one genius that ain't crazy. And in this moment, he's really talking about the pressures that create social conditions, right? And mental conditions, right? That make it difficult sometimes to create the art that one wants to create, or actually enables one. And this is what I say. Y'all want to call him crazy, but that same crazy made that song you're dancing to in the club.
Right.
Right. So, and so that's what I love about teaching this stuff, is that it really allows me to get students to understand Kanye in the broadest sense.
Right, because it's not just about appealing to the fandom, and it's not just about like the superficial act. There's something larger going on in terms of the conversation of what an artist should represent, what an artist can do, not just outside of time, but in this present day and age. It allows for a really a very dynamic conversation in the classroom.
And it's so important, especially as a person who teaches at the intersections of African American studies and gender studies. But I actually, when I pitched this course, I told them that this could be also a course in kind of urban design and material, urban fashion, right? And politics, right? Particularly talking about Kanye West and thinking about the ways in which he's entered so many other worlds, right? Sonic genius, but also, fashion motif. I thought that his fashion apparel was some of the worst fashion that I've seen, right? I did, I still do. I walked into a Houston Forever 21, and what do I see on display but this Kanye aesthetic?
Yep.
The kind of flesh material, brown colored, ready to wear, somewhat look like vagabond material, all exhibited. And I had to ask them, I said, is this the Kanye collection? And so I think that there's so many angles to how we can have this conversation. And quite frankly, I'll be honest and say, I think we can do this with most folks who have achieved this kind of iconographic status. I mean, there's been courses on Beyonce, right? I love Beyonce. There's been courses on Outkast. I love Outkast. They all make great offerings to the world that allow us to have courses, right? Yep. Courses are really thinking about offerings to the world and making them clear and available to students' minds, right? That's what we're doing, right? That's why we call them course offerings. And if Kanye didn't have anything to offer, I wouldn't teach the class.
Nope. And he wouldn't be where he is in life to where you would be teaching a class on him. It wouldn't even be a consideration if he had nothing to offer. You don't reach the level that he's reached without being able to offer something in the way of like philosophy or deconstruction about their journey and what they've made.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, do you view this as something that's going to be like you want to make it a regular class that's taught yearly, or is it something where having taught the Kanye class, you want to move on to other areas?
So this is difficult. I mean, so I am, I'm in the process of writing 2 books, right? And so part of the answer to the question is that we also teach what we are writing about, right?
Yeah.
And the scholars, that's common. And so there's the book on Kanye West, which I'm writing right now. And there's another book that I've been finishing for the last couple of years called Read, An Experiment in Seeing Black. And both of them actually are gesturing towards some of the same questions, right? What does it mean to have a critical generosity for Black people the way that we have critical generosity for white folks, right? And I think that is a question that can be added to the Kanye West course and the Kanye West manuscript, the same for the other books that I'm writing. And so I have a lot to do. And of course, I also do this whole kind of theological work, around theology and sexuality. And so I have some other courses that I'm going to put on the books. Now, I am thinking that maybe in a couple of years, right, after he makes this return, which I predict, right, I anticipate the kind of return of Kanye West, straight out of rehab or something, like whatever, so I think that this is all a story being made. And a little sidebar, I will say, one of the things that I know about iconography, about this idea of being followed around with the camera, that the only time that the paparazzi and media give you a break is when folks begin to say that you've gone crazy. Right? They leave you alone, right? If you say that you have a drug habit, if you say that you have mental instability, if you say that you have actually been physically harmed, right? Kim Kardashian, when she was robbed, right? All of a sudden the press is less, entangled in like hiding out around your house. Give her some time. Give him some time, right? And so I'm really excited because I actually think that he will come out of this and then we'll have a new Kanye moment. And in that moment, I will have a new album, I will have a new narrative, I will have a new philosophy, right? For thinking about how it is that the media and Kanye himself and his team produce the product and brand that has become Kanye West.
Which is a very large conversation and a very fascinating one, especially with the marriage to Kim Kardashian, because those are two people that, like, on their own had known how to hold media attention and develop celebrity and cultivate the icon status. So then when they're combined, And I feel like we've been able to see with Kim, like Kim's influence on Kanye and Kanye's influence on Kim, in terms of how they're continuing to develop their brands and their respective celebrities, that it's just going to get more interesting to see how they either put their foot on the accelerator or with kids back off a little bit. And there's conversations to be had either way, whatever they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's, I very rarely get into the Kim Kardashian, the Kimye relationship. And it's not that I'm not interested in it. I think that, romantic desire relationships are personal, and they are the things that we cherish the most. And no matter what the public says, right, there is something between them that is electric, right?
Yes.
And so to move to that electricity, I'll talk about what I often talk about, which is that I actually see them both as really a part of the Kanye conversation, right? When you think about who Kim Kardashian was and is, right? This kind of, I'm going to make it regardless of those who doubt my ability, right? I am going to cut through the public sphere, even if folks want to only refer to me in derogatory ways. I am actually going to use that and utilize whatever they're saying about me, right, as a way to kind of make it.
Yeah.
And there's something healthy about taking the very thing that the public has called deviance and turning it into resistance, right? And I think that Kanye's always been doing that, but I think that would, to me, be something that makes them a very comparable pair.
Yep.
And so I will probably talk about that in the course a little bit, but I imagine that it'll be very clear to my students that relationship to me is one that has always been anticipated. Like I don't know who else he would have dated. Like I don't know who else. I don't know who else. I find Kim, one, to be one of the most beautiful women in the world. And I also find her, of course, she has all the glam and glitz that Hollywood offers women of our time, and that's problematic and productive in its own way. But I think that's a part of the sell, right? And that's part of the brand, right? She's branding herself in a particular way, and that brand has definitely benefited her. And of course, it's benefited Kanye West as well.
It has. And I do think it is really interesting because I think at this point, my favorite Kanye song is Wolves, which I think captures so much about that. As you're saying, like, you could almost, in hindsight, anticipate them coming together because they do seem to both be made for each other in the way of how they've gone about their individual successes. And on Wolves, I just feel like that captures that, like, we saw them as successful, but they both had, like, flaws and breaks in them. And they recognize that in each other, which allows them to come together in a way that's both, like, emotionally satisfying for them, but also entrepreneurially and creatively satisfying for them. I love that song so much.
Yeah. I like Wolves. I do like Wolves. I think it's a nice song. You're laughing because you can tell that that's not my favorite.
Yeah, I can tell. Well, it's always like a bold thing, like Wolves. It's a song that people, I feel like, wanted something else from overall, and that still feel like, oh, there's this idea of Wolves that it could be more than what it is or something else, like, but I like it there.
But where I'll go that you may be surprised about is, since we're talking about favorites.
Yeah.
I know you like Wolves, but I actually think that album is probably his best comprehensive album.
It's my favorite album of his.
Life of Pablo?
Yeah, it's Life of Pablo, Yeezus, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy as the top three.
For you.
Yeah.
That's good. I have Yeezus, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and College Dropout, because it's just a classic, and you know the Chicago relationship there is just
Right.
deep. You know, and you know, in another category is Watch the Throne, right?
Absolutely.
I don't even put it in a ranking, right? It's another category, but and not above those, right? But just different. And so, you know, I really love Life of Pablo. I call it his gospel album, actually. I don't think Yeezus was really his gospel album, as much as he used that to kind of provoke a particular type of controversy. I definitely think that that his gospel album was Life of Pablo. And it dovetails quite nicely with Chance the Rapper's album, which is also, you know, I know we're talking about Kanye, but, you know, it dovetails quite nicely with that album as well.
Oh, with Coloring Book. Yeah.
Coloring Book, yeah. Coloring Book. Coloring Book is interesting, right?
It is. It's such a menagerie of sounds.
Yes. Yes, but many of them are drawn from old-fashioned Chicago gospel sound, and from which Kanye draws as well. And so that's part of what I'm interested in terms of thinking about the sonic, because the sonic also signals an awareness of connection that I think sometimes if we just look at the text, we miss it.
Right.
Right? So, yeah.
Nice. Oh, and is syllabus wise, do you have week by week a different topic that you're addressing, or is it something to where like each time you come in the students don't know what the conversation's going to be?
That would have been dope. I didn't think about that. That's a dope idea. where were you when I was planning this course, huh?
Yeah, course 2. Hit me up.
So look, I am always a prepared professor, so of course the syllabus is set, and there are surprises to the course. So in terms of the syllabus, I mean, what the course looks like is on Tuesdays, we're reading text, we're reading pieces from Julius Bailey's edited volume, The Cultural Impact of Kanye West. I don't know if you checked that out, but if you haven't, you check it out. We're reading Nicole Fleetwood's On Racial Icons. We're reading James Peterson's The Hip Hop Headphones, just so they can get grounded in kind of like other conversations. And then we're reading Kurt Graves' My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And so they have all that reading on Tuesdays, and we talk about it. I lecture about it. We have discussion. And then on Thursdays is the critical listening party. And on Thursdays, we hang out, we laugh, we critically use some of those ideas that we read about. The students are going to just be jazzed by that, I already know. But the other piece of it that they don't know is they don't know that we have guest artists coming in on Thursdays.
What?
And so, yes, so we have guest artists, St. Louis hip-hop artists who have kind of a kind of Kanye swag, right? And it kind of have been influenced by Kanye in some special ways. And so they're coming in on some Thursdays. And then we also have, as a part of the curriculum, as a part of the kind of, as I said, the community curriculum, these kind of three public lectures for the public and for the class and for the community that allows the public to engage with some of these critical conversations. And so I'm giving 3 key lectures in February, March, and April that will really open up this conversation. And so it's going to be a dynamic class, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. The students are excited about it. You know, my Dr. Jeffrey to you Twitter is blowing up. Which is crazy because that's not why I taught the course. I'll be honest.
Right.
I'm not that guy. I really believe in teaching what I'm passionate about, and not necessarily what I'm a fan of. Right. So I've taught a lot of courses. I taught a Lady Gaga, Beyonce, and Nicki Minaj course at University of Maryland when I was a professor there, and it was a great course, but it's not near as fabulous as this course. That course was just it was just too many things at once, right? I could have just taught a course on Nicki Minaj, right, or Lady Gaga, right? That would have been easy, but for some reason I
grouped them all together. Yeah.
I'm attracted to this formula, and so and I didn't have artists come in on that, and so this class is a different type of budget, a different type of everything. So I'm really excited about the possibilities. And what would be real dope, and I'll just say this, I haven't said this publicly to anybody, but what would make my world?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's if one day there was a hush that fell over the class, and then you're like, enter now, and the door opens, and then the lights turn down, and then in comes Kanye.
Yes,
showstopper.
That's exactly what it is, and that would just do it. But I do this work because I believe in the work, and I know he does his work because he believes in the work, and so I really do hope that opportunity happens. If that opportunity is coming, maybe I could invite you now.
Yeah, I would buy a plane ticket immediately and just be like St. Louis, or drive 30 hours. Austin to St. Louis. St. Louis to Austin. EI.
I will say I love the new Kanye. I love the old Kanye. I love Kanye. That's my little lyric.
Hell yeah.
I'm not a rapper at all.
Last question, I think. What's the final look like? What's the final going to be? Yeah.
So, because I love intimacy,
everybody else has to rap to you about Kanye. Yeah.
No, the final is a final group presentation. Final group presentations, and so it's groups of 8 to 10 students who take a very Kanye West iconographic moment, and then have to kind of look at it closely and analyze and bring in some of the readings. But most importantly, they have to be creative. And so they have to not only bring in stuff from inside the course, but they have to actually bring in stuff from outside the course. And it's an opportunity for them to talk about Black genius, but it's also an opportunity for them to talk about iconography, and it's also an opportunity for them to intimately engage. And that's my real big word, intimately engage with 1 to 2 texts of Kanye West.
Nice.
So it can't just be like, oh, I love this song. Oh, yeah, that's a great song. I love that one. No, I'm not here for that. And so, and then they have, during the course of the semester, they actually have other pieces that they have to write. It's a writing intensive course, actually, because I'm a writing intensive professor. And so, it's theoretical too. So I have them write it out because that's the only way to kind of flesh out these ideas. So I'm really excited about it. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome, because I do think that there's something, as people that admire somebody's music or work, there's a confrontation that doesn't normally take place with the idea of like, why do I admire this? What is it particularly that I can pinpoint about this person or about this time? And even if you're not necessarily a fan of the person, that kind of confrontation that you have to have with taking the emotions that you have inside of you and giving them the frame of language and of expression in a written format like you'd have to do for a paper or a presentation. It's a really interesting, I love Kanye moment of that confrontation of self and how you feel about a subject in a way that is logical to you and to somebody that just engages with those feelings now that are words on paper.
Yes. And it's so beyond the words, right? Like, it's so beyond the words. And how do I get, the public, but how do I get the students to be beyond the words, beyond the beats and rhymes, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen that documentary yet?
No.
Beyond Beats and Rhymes. Oh my God, you gotta see it. Byron Hertz, Beyond Beats and Rhymes. It's a dope documentary. But I think we do have to think beyond that, because hip hop is more than that. You know, and it's so interesting to me. Last thing I'll say about this, you know, because it's my this is my thing. You know, hip hop has been so ghettoized as a music. It's been thought of as the thing that we listen to when we want to do kind of debaucherous stuff, right? We want to get into debauchery. You listen to some hip hop music, right? Or our children when they are acting out. That's that hip hop, right? And that's been a theme since the beginnings of hip hop.
Yeah.
And what I've tried to do, and I think what Kanye actually does, is shows us that hip hop is not just this kind of heathenistic music, right? But it's actually music that incorporates multiple sounds, multiple genres, multiple messages, and multiple possibilities. And what greater purpose, right, as a professor, than to illuminate that beauty? Because black art is never just black, it's never just art, right? Whenever you put black in front of anything, right, it has politicized itself and it's always entangled in the discourses of our society. So we never just anything, right? It's never just hip hop. Oh, it's just hip hop. I don't know why you're teaching a course on that. It's just hip hop. It's just Kanye. No, it's not just anything, right? And so I think that to be just is to actually distribute the type of glorification that we give to so many other things to the music that is made by people at the margins.
Hell yeah. And we'll just end it with that because that's a beautiful place to end.